Okay, thank you very much for this, accepting our little break that we had here. And if I can get my colleagues to please join me, I would be very delighted by that. Thank you. Welcome to see you here. So the next item, item number 16 on our agenda today is the County Administrative Officer's comments. That would be you.
Working on something. I was working on something else.
Someone wake him up, will you?
My apologies. Yeah, my apologies. Thank you. I got sidetracked there very quickly.
Okay.
All right. First off,
Nick, would you like to come up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I apologize for that. First off, I do want to reflect back on earlier on your agenda, your consent calendar. You approved the contract for Dr. Chad Harris, as your new NMC CEO, and I think that's a great move on the Board of Supervisors' part. As everybody who knows Chad knows, he's really innovative and a great collaborator. So that would be it's a really great move for the county having Dr. Harris there as the permanent CEO of Natividad. And second, I just also wanted to inform the board and everyone else that what is known as community project funding, which used to be known as earmarks at the federal level, is happening again, and we have a very short time window in order to get our projects into our congresspersons and our senators at the federal level. We basically have until April 4th to do that. The recommendations are to look at projects that are under $1 million. And roughly within the $200,000 to $400,000 window, that seems to be the sweet spot to get things approved through that process. We're looking at trying to get a common list so that we're not sending different proposed projects to the Congress as opposed to the Senate. And we were looking at somewhere between 5 and 7 projects to be submitted so that we're not overwhelming and not getting anything approved, and also to have those projects prioritized. We're going to work with the department heads to try to come up with the appropriate list to forward on to our Congressman Panetta, as well as Senators Padilla and Feinstein. We also want to thank our federal lobbyist, Brent Heberly at Ballard Spahr, for helping get this work coordinated, as well as Annette Diadamo. And we'll report back to the board where we are with that process when it is completed. But I just want to let you know that that's ongoing and the time frame is really short.
Exactly what is the time frame?
We have to have in by April 4th.
April 4th,
So
okay.
before our next meeting of the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. And now we will move to new referrals.
Okay, so we have one new referral this week from, sorry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was hoping to comment on.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've got all the time in the world.
We'll be here all night. No, I just wanted to point out that last year, Monterey County had one earmark that was put in by our congressman, which was the South of Salinas project, and it did not get funded. So I'm hoping that we can consider keeping that on the list, especially given yesterday's accident. A young mother with 3 children was struck by a vehicle making an illegal U-turn onto 101, and all 3 children were flighted out. It was a tragic accident. Again, it was an illegal U-turn, but that very project was the reason we were trying to get the project funded and moving, is because of those types of accidents. So just hoping that we can consider that as one of ours in the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Chair, it's the new referrals. We have a new referral from Supervisors Askew and Adams, which is, to have a name a building or facility or an area at Natividad after former Supervisor Barbara Shipnuck, who was the first woman supervisor on our board. And I just would like to respectfully request the supervisors amend that referral so that we can draft a Natividad specific policy or amend the existing county naming policy to have an orderly process with criteria, and that we would bring that policy draft to the Capital Improvement Committee, then to the Board of Trustees, and then to the Board of Supervisors. And then we would follow that policy as far as naming for Natividad. And I know we're not meeting again for a while, so I wanted to get that request in if the two referring supervisors would be supportive of that amendment to their referral.
My expectation is that wouldn't have any bearing on slowing anything down that we could be planning, correct?
It might slow it down a little bit as far as, bringing something forward. We would do the policy first and then bring forward something specific for the former supervisor.
That sounds perfect. Do you agree with that? Great, good. Okay, thank you so much for that. That was a wonderful new referral that we have. And now I want to ask whether or not we have to vote on board referrals.
No, you don't have to vote on board referrals on that new referral unless you wanted to make some changes specific that are different than what I just suggested, or you want to withdraw it.
I think we should just go ahead and move forward.
Yes.
Yes. Is there any public comment on this item? Do you see any hands raised?
There are no hands raised.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody in the chambers who wishes to make comment? Okay, seeing none, Supervisor Rudasky, I think our referral is moving forward as we had hoped. Okay, now we will go on to referral responses, which is item number 18. And the first is a preliminary analysis report on seeking Monterey County Health Department's Behavioral Health Bureau to provide a comprehensive presentation on the Mental Health Services Act funding is being used in Monterey County.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. I will be doing the presentation on Behavioral Health Bureau's behalf. I'm joined by Fabricio Chambo, our finance director, or our finance manager, sorry, and my assistant bureau chief, John Drake. I am the Behavioral Health Bureau chief. And so I want to thank you for the opportunity to bring this information forward. This is a preliminary report. We will be preparing a comprehensive presentation and bringing that back to the board in the next couple of months. And at the end of today's presentation, I will ask the board to direct staff to return to the Budget Committee and subsequent Board of Supervisors meeting with that comprehensive presentation. And so if I can share my screen, hold on. We have, here we go, share. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. All right. So just to give you a brief history of Mental Health Services Act, this was passed by voters in 2004, enacted in 2005, and it was a new funding source to expand mental health services, which had been historically underfunded in the state for decades. The primary target populations were the unserved and the underserved members of our communities. And it really includes the voice of the people. So there is robust community involvement to identify needs and to then allocate the resources coming from the funding. These needs are compiled into 3-year plans based on all that stakeholder input. And then ultimately they get approved by our Board of Supervisors. As a county that has a population of over 200,000 in population, we have 3 years to expend the funds in any of the areas of MHSA. The other piece that I really wanted to highlight is that MHSA funds can be very volatile. These are the source of funding is millionaires' taxes, so income taxes on millionaires. And while we get revenues on a monthly basis, we don't actually know how much revenue we're going to get until after people have filed their taxes at year end, and then there is a true up. So there's revenues that come to us, but there is uncertainty. And so sometimes at the end of the year, we might have a pretty large increase in true up, or there's times where we have had the opposite, where we basically have been overpaid and funds might be taken away from us. The funds are tied to specific areas. So we have categories where we have to spend the funding. The largest of those areas is community support services, or CSS. And 76% of our allocations must be spent in this area. This is the services for the seriously mentally ill or the severely emotionally disturbed youth and their families. These are voluntary services. 50% of these revenues have to go to support full service partnerships, which are basically a whatever it takes model, serving these individuals who are most gravely ill. And really the focus is about recovery and resiliency and really trying to help people improve their functioning in our communities. About 19% of our allocation goes to prevention and early intervention. These are services designed to prevent mental illnesses from becoming severe and disabling. And no less than 51% of our prevention and early intervention dollars have to be spent on serving children and youth, including the transitional age youth, so individuals who are 25 years of age or younger. Innovation funding is one of our more interesting places. So 5% of the total funds that come to us are for innovation programs. And so these are to fund, well, again, innovative approaches to expand access to services to underserved, to increase quality, to promote interagency and community collaboration. Really, innovation funds are supposed to be spent on answering a question that we haven't resolved yet. So innovation funds are not to be used for evidence-based programs. They're used to help develop what might become an evidence-based program at some point down the road, or sometimes to explore something and determine that might not be a best practice. There are significant processes that we have to go through with the Oversight and Accountability Commission at the state level to identify whether or not a proposed innovation program would be approved and be permissible to operate. We have capital, facilities, and technology needs. Once upon a time, we got allocated funding directly for that, and also workforce education and training. And again, once upon a time, we had funding that was allocated directly to that. At this point in time, there's no allocation that goes directly to either of those areas. However, we are allowed to transfer 10% of our community services funds in any given year to those different areas, as long as we build it into our plans. As we have noted, right now we do have a pretty significant fund balance. We have 55 million based at the end of 21-22 is what we're predicting. And this fully accounts for our operating reserves. It also has specific set-asides that the board has taken action on previously. So we have a set-aside right now for prior year audits of 8.4 million. That is specifically when we are operating a lot of our programs, we're billing for federal dollars through Medi-Cal, and MHSA might be providing the matching dollars for that federal dollars. So if at some point in time we have denials of those federal costs or audits where we have to pay back funds, and the feds have determined that the feds should not have had to contribute to a particular service, then we will have to pay those funds back to the feds. And if it was an MHSA program where these costs were incurred, then it is MHSA that would be repaying that particular cost. We also have a prudent reserve of 4.8 million. That's really set aside in case of economic downturn and in case of really our revenues dipping to a low level, and trying to ensure that we have sustainable services to our community. We have the capital funds. We have $5.9 million set aside in the capital funds right now. We have several capital projects on the horizon, so we are looking at spending those out. And then we have about $1.6 million for our workforce education and training. Again, that is something that we are actively spending out. And then the remaining funds are to be used in our community services and supports, our prevention and early intervention, and the innovation areas. I do want to highlight that the fund balance does meet the board's general financial policies for major funds of maintaining that operational reserve and the strategic reserve that is equal to 10% of annual revenue. I think that one of the other things that I just really wanted to highlight is that many times we do not know what our annual revenues will be until after the year ends. So for instance, the year that ended July 1, or June 30th of 2021, we got our true up adjustment in July, say, of 2021, which then tells us what our actual for the year that just ended. We can guess, we can forecast, we can try to budget, but it is an unknown. And so then when we get a true up, so for instance, this past year, we budgeted an increase in revenues from our previous years, and we actually realized about 7.9 million extra over and above what we had budgeted, which is excellent because that means that we have money to invest in services in our community. It also means that we have to, so we find out that we have this extra money after the end of the year. We then have to engage in the stakeholder process, gather the community input, update our 3-year plans, build it into our budgets, bring it back to the Board of Supervisors, and then have it be approved in both our MHSA plan and in our budget for the upcoming year. So all of that has been going on in current fiscal year for revenues that we were due from last fiscal year that now we will be able to spend in the upcoming fiscal year. So it is really kind of a systemic delay built into MHSA, and so just wanting to ensure that we have some clarity about that. One other thing that I'd like to point out is we are expecting a positive increase at year end this year as well. And so again, it's a guessing game. We're not there yet, but we're looking at some of the fiscal analyses based on income streams coming to us right now, and then talking with different experts at the state. And we expect that we'll probably have revenues coming in higher than budgeted again this year, and somewhere in the range of $5 to $10 million is our expectation. We don't know if it's 5 million. We don't know if it's 10 million. We don't actually even know that it will be in excess of our budget. But that is the, we think that there is positive revenues coming to us, and we're trying to take actions now to be able to prepare for that and shorten that time frame to be able to deliver services and get the community needs met as fast as we possibly can. So moving on, I mentioned again the uncertainty in economy, and that drives where our revenues go. One other thing that I'd like to highlight, this year and last year, there was significant expectations that revenues would decline because of the pandemic, because of COVID. There was a thought that we would be going into a recession. And we, I think statewide, we really expected that we needed to be very, very careful with our MHSA spending to make sure that we were able to sustain the most needed services to our communities. We also, despite that, did budget a modest increase in revenues. We did expect to have some increase in revenues. We certainly did not expect to have almost $8 million increase in revenues, which is what we actually ended up with. So that has been really fascinating. And again, it really does mean that we can provide some additional supports and services to our community now. I've mentioned that the current laws, regulations, and processes that we have to follow before being able to spend the MHSA funds, we have to do the stakeholder input process. We have to have various components of our plan approved at different levels before we're allowed to spend a dollar. And that is just the process we have to follow. The other challenge, and we've mentioned this before, is that there is a workforce shortage right now with behavioral health. So both in directly within county behavioral health, with our contractors, and throughout the system. If we look across the state of California, there is a massive workforce shortage. So we budget to provide services either directly or through contracts, and then vacancies have been making it very, very challenging to get those services delivered. And so that has been a challenge. And then one other thing, which is very positive, the feds have increased some of their financial participation, and so they have been paying us additional funds for the services we're providing, which then subsidizes the MHSA monies that we have available to, again, serve our community and stretches them a little bit further. My apologies, Supervisor Alejo. I see that your hand is up. Can I answer a question for you?
No, it's for when you're done.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. So right now where we're at, we have no risk of reversion. That is, of course, a primary consideration because it's monies that are due to our community. We want to make sure that we spend our monies in our community to serve our community. There had been $8 million of community services and supports funds that had been identified at risk of reversion. They've already been spent, so that is really not an issue. As part of our 21-22 annual update and with community input, we are looking at maximizing our MHSA funds. I fully expect that we will spend out all of our community services and supports revenues, all of our prevention and early intervention revenues. And we are looking at different options for our innovation programs right now. We are also, I mentioned that we've got some capital facilities projects going on. We will be looking at spending some funds there, and then also with our workforce education piece. We also, have to continue to acknowledge that MHSA funds are restrictive in nature. We have to spend the funds in the areas that are defined in the law. And so we have been very careful as we've been gathering our stakeholder input to build the programs and make proposals in the areas where the resources are attributed to. We have to continue to follow those regulations and processes. There definitely is uncertainty in the economy. Again, what we are seeing for an outlook right now is that, again, we expect a positive adjustment at year end this year. And I believe that that positive adjustment will be in multiple millions of dollars, which we will then plan for to be able to, build into our programs and the subsequent year. We also see on the horizon, our experts are alerting us that there is a decline in revenue that is anticipated in the 24-25 fiscal year. And so what that looks like, again, I don't have the crystal ball. I can't say exactly what that is. We do know that, the economy has different cycles. We've had, the economy doing pretty well for a sustained period of time. And what has been truly unforeseen is we've had the millionaires who fund MHSA doing very well for a sustained period of time. And so that's kind of an overview as to where we're at and what we're looking at. We definitely have more information that we are pulling and putting together and compiling. I do again request that that you direct me and my team to deliver a comprehensive presentation to the Budget Committee in April, and then come back to the Board of Supervisors in May, and we certainly can share more detailed information with you at that point.
Thank you so much for that very comprehensive report. I think it was Supervisor Alejo's referral, and I see he has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank Ms. Eckert for her presentation today, and to Elsa Jimenez, the Health Department Director. First of all, I want to commend them for the work. This is not intended to in any way try to say that they weren't doing their jobs here, but they've done a lot of good work. We just had a groundbreaking of the new behavioral health clinic in East Salinas. So those are all great things behavioral health is doing. So I want to commend all the team on that. The reason this came to concern is because just some history. This was a concern for the Budget Committee going back 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago. And we have quarterly reports on the MHSA funding because 4 years ago, the state auditor, Elaine Howell, did do an audit on all MHSA funding in the state. And it was very critical of the state agencies for not providing counties more direction on how to properly spend that money. But then there was $500 million that was at risk of reversion because the counties had 3 years to spend the money or else it would go back to the state. And Monterey County was on that list of counties that had, I believe, somewhere between $10 and $15 million that was at risk. And so we didn't want to be in a position where our county sent back any money that could otherwise be put to good use serving our residents with these special needs. And so one question, Ms. Eckert, was just also, I know there was in 2018, I believe it was the ballot measure, the legislature, because they saw a lot of money not being spent, revamped and put a ballot a measure on the ballot that siphoned off some of the MHSA funding to be used for the No Place Like Home, which was specifically for housing and a permanent supportive housing needs, the services that go along with that for our homeless residents. And so I know in the budget you listed, there's a certain percentage that goes to just that purpose, the No Place Like Home. And I believe the last numbers I looked at several days ago, I think it was a little over $2 million for that. So what all this spurred in my mind was, one, there should be a greater collaboration when we talk about Department of Social Services. We had a presentation earlier about Roxanne Wilson. It seems like this is $55 million. And I think the number you listed of some of the encumbered dollars was just about under $21 million, but it still leaves $34 million. And as you're rightly pointing out, we expect there to be another true up and perhaps another big bump of numerous more $1 million. And so instead of 55, we might be at 65 million come the summer. And when I looked at the history of the proposition that put MHSA on the ballot, it was intended to strengthen and reform for the better our behavioral health system in California. And when I see these big, large sums of money in an account, for me, I see that it's not really carrying out the intent of the voters, which was having these millionaires pay this tax, but it was intended for counties to be having a large reserves that are not serving the people it was intended to. And when we have huge housing needs, when we have huge mental health needs, we should be more strategic and having a broader conversation with the full board, with behavioral health, with the health department, with other partners to see where could we put this money to good use. And so it's a good problem that we have. We have the money more. We might have that true up, which is another good problem. But now, how do we make sure that we are spending it the way the voters intended it to be spent within our own county? And I know these, and I wanted also to, when this comes back, to give the board a sense of what are the many different ways that MHSA dollars could be spent. Much goes to support nonprofit partners. As you pointed out, some goes to prevention programs in our high schools for violence prevention. But new clinics. But I know there's many other things. I know, like, for example, the crisis support team, I believe, gets funded through some of this. And those are those critical teams of social workers that work with law enforcement when there's some person that perhaps is at risk of getting shot. It's those crisis support teams that are deployed that put social workers out there, highly trained social workers that could help de-escalate a situation and hopefully prevent a life being taken. And we've had those kind of tragic cases within Monterey County. So that's where I'm saying, where in the wide range of things that we could support, where could we strategically prioritize that funding to put it to good use so that we could tell our residents that we don't have a large sum of money in an account, but rather we are keeping a healthy reserve. As you pointed out, the 5.9 is a healthy reserve. That's important, but we're in our budget and in addressing the needs of our homeless and other community needs, where can we put these dollars to have the greatest impact? And I know you guys are the experts in it, but we just, in my 5-6 years, we haven't had a more extensive conversation on MHSA among the full board. And I thought this was the right time to have it, as we do have a good problem and a good challenge that we could of how do you spend this money to benefit the people who should be getting the services and the housing that could be available through MHSA. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment, Supervisor Alejo. In fact, it came to my mind as we see that the revenue for First Five is going to be declining as people stop smoking. I feel like the tax on the people whose income is more than $1 million a year might be an appropriate place to invest some of that funding. So thank you for that. And let me just see if there.
Madam Chair, one thing I just forgot, because it's in the context of recent events, because the governor announced the new CARES Court for homeless residents. This was another concern I had, that if the state, with this new program, that it's going to be very expensive because it requires counties to deploy services and it requires the courts to create this new specialty court. I'm sure that in Sacramento, the governor and the legislature are going to be looking at MHSA dollars of how to fund this new proposal coming forward. And that's where I'm saying, if they're seeing that counties have big surpluses, I could easily see the state now say, well, that could be part of the mechanisms, funding mechanisms that fund the new CARES Court proposal. So I just wanted to put that in context too. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
My apologies.
I
just want to also just share that the budget submittal that we have made will eat into a significant amount of the dollars we have here. We are looking at fully expending. The budget proposal does look at fully expending the revenues that are coming in and that we're budgeting to. And so I do want to highlight that, and then also highlight the fact that we have to spend the dollars that in the areas that the law prescribes. So we don't always have the flexibility either to there's many worthy causes that MHSA funds aren't able to support. And so I don't want to build up expectations that that we would not be able to realize, but definitely we
Thank
can
you.
provide more information. on all
Something
of that.
tells me we're going to have a much greater discussion about this on April 5th when we have our budget hearings. But let me just see if my colleagues have any other questions or comments. Yes, Supervisor Phillips, I mean, whatever your name is, Gomez,
The other one.
Lopez.
Third tries a charm. Yeah, at this hour, I'm sure they do. So no, I just, wanted to express the same sentiment that you did, Madam Chair, about especially the IFECMH funding that we do utilize through First Five to make sure that families are ready and prepared to identify issues. But given the time, largely, I was hoping to make the motion to follow staff's recommendation. As the member of the Board of Supervisors on the Behavioral Health Commission, I'm happy to make the motion to send this back to the Budget Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a second to
I'll make
that?
sure the referral now.
So we have let's take it out to the public. Is there anyone out there who wishes to comment on this item? I see our big customer, Kevin, has left for the day. I'm not seeing anyone come forward. Is there any hand raised? Okay.
There's one hand raised, Cesar Lara.
Yes, Mr. Lara, if you'd like to make your comment.
Yeah, good afternoon, members of the Board of Supervisors. Mental Health Services Act is, I think, an important issue that I've been tracking for years and been part of a nonprofit when it first got proposed and it went out to voters. So it clearly has a definition of where funding needs to go. But I think part of the response also needs to be that some of the proposed system changes that this money was going to brought forth have been made. And so thinking broadly around mental health is important. Looking at examples like in Colorado, where when people call 911 and need support, an officer is not deployed, but a mental health staff is deployed. I think are examples that we need to look at to stay within the spirit of the voters' will, but also think outside the box in the new reality. 10 plus years since it got first brought in, and I really love the discussion that was being brought up around thinking outside the box, but also understanding that behavioral health was the leading reason why voters voted for this, and looking at maybe the cycle of incarceration, because if we bring forth good quality work training programs, employment programs, housing, but mental and healthcare, you might break the cycle of incarceration. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your insight. Is there anyone else with their hand raised?
There's not.
I'm seeing none. I will bring it back to the board. Any further comments before we take a vote on this? And I think Supervisor.
No.
Supervisor Lopez, did you seriously make a motion?
I did, but happy to let Supervisor Lejo be the first. I'll be the second. I
Okay,
heard
thank
his.
you. Okay, so let's have a roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Alejo,
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips.
Aye.
Supervisor Lopez.
Aye.
Supervisor Askew.
I'm an aye, and I was going to make a motion that we send it back to the 4-H committee, but I'm happy to take it over to budget. So thank you. Yep, we're good to go. Thanks.
And Chair Supervisor Adams.
Aye. Thank you very much. And with that, we will close item number 18 and go to item number 19, which is to receive a progress report from the Information Technology Department in response to Board Referral 2021.08. And may I ask whose referral was this one?
It's Alejo and Lopez.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're getting our slide pulled up here real quick. Good afternoon, Chair Adams, members of the board, staff, and the public. I'm Eric Chatham. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the County of Monterey. With me, I have Alex Zhang, who's the Deputy CIO for the county. He's been the lead on this, all of our broadband projects, and as we work through this together and addressing digital divide. And so the first one is that we have two in a row here, but the first one is just a progress report. It's our quarterly report on the different broadband projects we have going on throughout the county. Go to the next slide. So we've recently finished a broadband RFP, which is using our ARPA funding, and we'll discuss that more. We'll talk a little bit about the Regional Broadband Task Force, the San Gerardo Project, the public Wi-Fi stats and sites that we put throughout the county, and then board referral, which we'll have another discussion on our next item for the South County JPA. So the broadband RFP, we are granted through the board process $1.935 million of ARPA funds. We did an RFP process of which we had 5 vendors with 16 different proposals. We picked the top 3 projects that we could fit into our funding source. 2 of those are going to Spectrum, which is in San Ardo, which will service about 500 underserved or unserved constituents, and the San Lucas project will serve approximately 200. And then the Cruise IO Internet is going to cover North County and parts of Salinas, which will cover 500 unserved or underserved individuals and up to 1,800 other homes in the area that will have another option as far as their internet provider. We're currently in the agreement process, which will be coming to the board shortly for approval, and we'll be distributing those funds so we can get those projects kicked off. Next slide. The Regional Broadband Task Force. This is a task force that's put together 6 different entities, of which the county is part of. During our last meeting, we talked about the RFP update, which everyone was quite happy to see that it's actually moving forward. We talked about the South Salinas Valley JPA and what was happening with that, which is a Supervisor Lopez referral, which we'll talk to next. We talked about the rural counties representatives of California and the strategic plan update, which we are getting closer to getting the funding, which will help build a strategic plan for the entire county around broadband. We also got a report out from MCOE, the Office of Education, about broadband needs they have, and they have an RFP out currently of connecting some of the underserved schools, such as the San Antonio School and some of the other South County schools that are in some rural areas that are not covered well. So, quick update on the San Gerardo project, which is a CPUC funded project that went to Cruise IO, and then Cruise IO reached out to us via Supervisor Lopez to help them get some internal facilities use and antenna areas. We worked with Public Works to get those antenna sites taken care of, which we were able to do. This will service about 66 homes, the child care center, and the community hall in that community, and provide free service to that community for 5 years. And that project is expected to complete in May of this year, end of May. Public Wi-Fi, when the pandemic hit and the digital divide hit, we quickly took advantage of the fact that we were able to mount public Wi-Fi to many of our facilities around here. We put 22 county buildings and over 70 Wi-Fi devices out there. We have 5 additional sites to deploy, but just to give you an idea, the continued usage is growing and growing, which is great to see. There's no impact to the county with that usage. There's almost 3 terabytes of data that was transferred, and over 2,400 individual users in a 30-day period, and that's up from just 1,900 in the prior period. So we have a continual usage happening, and lots of folks taking advantage of that free Wi-Fi. And then the board referral, which I'll talk to in just a second, for 2022.09. And this is for creating the 5 cities joint JPA, develop broadband, but this is really about looking at developing an open access network broadband. So we'll talk more about that in detail in the next presentation. But for now, that's the report out of the quarterly summary of just our broadband projects. And we are available for any questions on any of those items.
Thank you very much for that attenuated presentation. Are there questions from this end? Nope. Okay.
Just appreciation.
Thank you very much. Questions from Supervisor Askew. I do have a couple of questions, and I wanted to ask if I just don't want to lose sight of how critical the need is for better broadband and internet connectivity in remote areas on the coast. They don't even have cell service, and that it's proven to be just a huge issue. In fact, the recent Colorado fire highlighted that this is a real public safety need. And I just want to be sure that we keep this as a priority area, that is also being addressed. And I was just wondering if there were any proposals put forward from either the Big Sur or the Kashawa area, which also has no cell coverage.
So during our RFP process, there were no proposals that were in that area. But as we talk about this, the JPA proposal, there are two different areas, the middle mile component and the RDOF component, which I'll talk to briefly, and that may be covering some of those areas. We're waiting for the details. Everyone's given us very broad maps, which show coverage over most of Monterey County, but then the devil's in the details of what does most really mean. We also do know that there is a project being done by AT&T down in the Big Sur area, but we were unable to get any answers as to what they're actually going to do with that project. So we don't know if they're expanding cellular service or expanding broadband services to those areas.
Perhaps our office can help you with that in
Yes.
some ways.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
If I could just
Chris?
jump in on it,
Mhm.
the other piece that was briefly mentioned was the RCRC. 27 counties have gone out to request an economic development, essentially analysis of access and what that impact is to our local businesses and communities. We are this close to approval, and so we're very excited about that opportunity. But again, that is countywide. So with that, we will get that picture of where we missing connectivity and recommendations on steps to take to improve that. So that will be addressed as part of that larger report.
Thank you for that bit of good news. I
course.
appreciate it. Supervisor Lejo, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, I want to thank our IT department for the presentation, all the good work you've done in a short time, and that with some of the money, ARPA money that we approved, that we're moving forward to have those projects be realized. What I would add, this is a great time that we started early because things are moving. Obviously, yesterday, Congressmember Panetta announced that there was an additional $15 million coming to Monterey County, but that is being distributed directly to school districts to meet the digital divide needs of their students and their families. That is great news. And we've also forwarded the proposed funding and program under the Public Utilities Commission to Mr. Chatham to provide our comments on behalf of our county residents on that proposal. There's a proposed $17 million to come to Monterey County, but that's competitive. That means all local governments get to compete for that funding allocation. But whether we should get more in that formula, that's a good question. Other counties like El Dorado County under that proposed program would get over $100 million. And I know they're more rural, and so their infrastructure needs are different. But it doesn't mean that that we shouldn't speak up and tell the state whether under that formula Monterey County should be getting more to be able to meet some of the needs that Supervisor Adams was just talking about, other parts of the counties that we know that there is need there as well. The last thing I would just point out is that this year we do have a bill that was introduced. It's supposed to go through the committee this week or next week, AB 2256. And that was Monterey County's bill idea to have a local government representative serve on the Middle Mile Advisory Council. So I'm glad that my former colleague, Sharon Quirk Silva, the chair of the Assembly Communications and Conveyance Committee, is authoring that for Monterey County. We are the sponsor of that bill, as is CSAC. So just other examples where Monterey County, again, is the leader on broadband and closing the digital divide in our state. We have actual bills. We are pushing that local governments be brought to the table so that when the multi-billion-dollar decisions being made about where to deploy the middle mile infrastructure, that local governments will have a voice at the table. So I just wanted to also add those additional comments to Mr. Chatham's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will look out and see no members of the public who are speaking, and I see that we have one hand raised, and that is someone whose telephone number ends in 902. If you'd like to unmute yourself, you can press *6, and you have 30 seconds. Please go ahead and begin.
This is Nina Beatty calling in. I'm a county stakeholder in this proposal. I'm a disabled person, and I and people like me are being ignored in these plans. I request that the county use wired infrastructure exclusively in your plans. Wired internet will increase availability, but using wireless infrastructure will expand the digital divide. The toxicity of wireless radiation is well established. The county is not doing its due diligence, but is rushing this forward. The costs have not been examined to me and people like me and the environment of Monterey County. This should be evaluated under CEQA. Wireless broadband increases the toxic exposure to children and families at their homes and schools. The hazards include increasing cancer and tumor risk, DNA damage, cognitive and neurological impacts, fertility problems, oxidative stress, and more. The county health department has been refusing to address this for years. There is a liability to the county through the public-private melding of assets from the hazardous exposures, according to attorneys that have looked at this. Wireless radiation exposure also increases depression, anxiety, agitation. Those are mental health problems that are being increased by more exposure. And at least 13,000 Monterey County men, women, and children already are at risk from this. They're already environmentally sensitive to it. In SB 649 and AB 57, firefighters were given exemption from this type of situation for health reasons. And LA firefighters ran radio ads opposing antennas on their fire stations for LA RICS. This is well
Thank you for
known.
your comments. I appreciate them. Very good. Okay. With that, I'm going to, yes.
One last comment, and that's just that I know I sent Eric and Charles some of the preliminary numbers from the state's, the CPUC's proposal to send out to local governments. And I do feel we're getting shorted. I've had a little conversation with our Senator Caballero about that, but I'm hoping that maybe our legislative team can work with Eric to send an official letter asking, after looking at that, to make sure that we get what we need for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to, don't know that we need to have a motion on this item. I think it's a receive information. And I will now close this item and go on to item number 20, which is to get a preliminary analysis regarding the JPA.
All right, thank you. This was a board referral from Supervisor Lopez that we received 2022.09 to explore the potential of creating a Salinas Valley 5 Cities Joint Powers of Authority. So at IT, excuse me, I've been sitting out there so long, everything's.
Oh.
ITG supports the JPA initiative, which enables cities and county to work together through a collective vision and strategic planning and cost sharing for administrative services. But to provide the board, the full board with more information on it, we took a look at the JPA agreement. The JPA's purpose is to maximize the funding for bringing broadband as a utility available to all residents at a low cost by developing a community, publicly owned, open access broadband network, which you'll hear me refer to as OBAN. Inside this agreement, they have suggested to appoint the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership as the executive director with an additional $50,000 per year. That would be divided among the 5 members. So each member group would provide $10,000 for the initial year. There are specific projects listed, and they're in Exhibit B. One is to extend the connected Central Coast middle mile fiber from Soledad to San Luis Obispo. One's to develop an open access spurs off that Central Coast fiber route to unserved and underserved areas, and then implement various initiatives that benefit wireless internet providers. We took that initial information, and then we met with council and the CAO to review the JPA. We met again with Supervisor Lopez to get additional clarity on what they were looking for from that JPA. We did meet with RCRC, the Rural County Representatives of California, regarding broadband funding opportunities and the benefits of having a regional JPA, which they believed was beneficial. We also met with Utopia Fiber, which is an operator of an O-band network in Utah, which we are referred to by RCRC, regarding their open access network business model so we can understand that better. And then we met with the Corporation for Education Network Initiatives in California, which is referred to as CENIC. They run a lot of the fiber that runs between the educational facilities, and discussed state middle mile initiatives with them to understand if there were any overlapping initiatives happening. So Alex is going to describe quickly what an open access and O-band network is.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Alex Zhang. I'm the Deputy CIO for the ITD department. So in front of you, you are seeing this open access diagram. And open access network is an arrangement in which one physical network is open to multiple internet service providers to offer services. It can potentially encourage ISP competition and lower the subscriber cost. So as an analogy, Open access network is like a toll road or airport. The network owner owns and funds the road construction. The operator builds and maintains the road, and multiple internet service providers provide services by using the road and pay a fee. They then use the network to offer competitive services to the end users or subscribers. The open access network is popular in countries such as Sweden, France, and Japan. However, in the US, this model has been used less frequently. Open access model tends to be more common in middle mile network than in the last mile networks. And many ISPs are used to using the middle mile network that they do not control to connect their various last mile networks. The companies such as AT&T, actually, they lease connections from other providers in some cases. And one of the open access networks challenge is to get service providers. It may take time actually for ISPs to join this open access network, while the incumbent ISPs do not often want to do their businesses on the open access infrastructure. The small ISPs may join. Back to you, Eric.
So the simple view of that is many of the existing, your larger corporations, AT&T, Verizon, Charter, they like to use their own fiber and keep it private. It gives them end-to-end control over connecting to and from their ISP to their constituents. An open access broadband network would allow an owner to provide that service to any ISP. So AT&T could run over it, Verizon could run over it, and local smaller business could run over it, which creates competition and lowers overall costs and gets to a larger number of constituents out there. So next slide. So our quick feedback that we provide is we support the open access network approach. It leverages federal and state funds to pay for projects rather than member contributions, which is what keeps us from having to spend significant dollars, and continues to lower subscriber costs to constituents. Building the network expeditiously and leveraging existing infrastructure where feasible to help unserved and underserved. There are many competing middle mile and fiber locations. So as much as those things can be considered, and when this gets built out, the faster and the cheaper it will be to be delivered to constituents. We would suggest removing specific projects and vendor names from the JPA to keep the agreement general. That gives more flexibility in the JPA. Doesn't mean you can't use the ones that were suggested. It just means that you would have the ability to go to others if you so chose. And the JPA, it could benefit the entire county if other districts or entities were to join, and that doesn't preclude them from moving forward at this point in time and joining at a later point in time. So the summary of the next steps, we have addendums on this. I'd be happy to go through those, but given the time, I will if you suggest, but otherwise they're in there for your pleasure in reading at a later hour tonight with your glass of wine and dinner. Since Alex now says we are in the evening and no longer in the afternoon, so we'll keep moving on. Here's our next steps. We support the proposed JPA and the open access approach. And the board has, if the board could give us direction at this point in time on next steps, we put several options here and other options can be brought up. These were just to give you an idea of what we could do. We can authorize the proposed JPA and move forward. We could authorize the proposed JPA and direct ITD to provide suggested modifications to the agreement. We could direct ITD to come back with more information, or we could choose not to move forward. And with that, I'd leave it to the board to provide direction.
Thank you very much for your report, your attenuated report. Oh dear, it looks like we have county council at the bench, which is always a little scary.
It's on. Thank you. Honorable Chair, members of the board, just a quick comment on the JPA agreement itself. I received the original from Renee Mendez, the city manager of the city of Gonzales. I gave him some initial feedback just on the format of it, but doing a deeper dive, we have some significant suggested edits to make the agreement comport with the JPA statutory authority law. So we're prepared to send those back to Mr. Mendez. We worked with Mr. Chatham and his team on some of the substance, but there's also some formatting and editorial comments that need to be made. So if the board wants us to move forward, we would engage in that discussion with the representatives from the other cities. One important thing to note, the agreement provides that the JPA is a separate entity from Monterey County with its own liabilities and responsibilities that don't default back to Monterey County. And that's pretty typical with the JPAs that Monterey County belongs to. That's all I have.
And that
Thank
makes you happy. That's a positive. Okay. Supervisor Lopez, it's yours. What do
I
you-
could expound on this for hours. Given the hour, I won't. I'll just say that it's something that obviously I'm passionate about and excited to hopefully move forward with the support of my colleagues. So at the appropriate time, I hope the board would consider option 2, which is to authorize the proposed JPA and direct ITD and county council to provide suggested modifications to the agreement and then bring that back to the board when appropriate.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the board?
Yes, ma'am. I want to just get clarification, Supervisor Lopez. This started originally with the 4 South County cities, but now I just want to be clear that it also now includes Salinas.
I don't think so. I think Salinas was invited but chose not to participate.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the last I heard that it was a maybe. So it will be a true South County JPA. And I guess just for Eric, I guess every JPA new entity then comes staffing, right? And how to properly fund that among 4 cities to hire, a director and other needed support staff. Office operations costs. So that's what's really going to be the challenge of how would a new JPA be able to continue to fund itself moving forward on a yearly basis. I know that's been the challenge for all these other entities, our new flood management agency. We're all going. The GSA went through this, but we had contributing partners that all chipped in. The question for this one would be who would be those partners to make sure that it's sustainable and that it's successful. But I know that's all part of the analysis that will come back to us. Thank you.
County Council?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Supervisor Alejo, just for your information, the idea that has been conveyed to us is that the projects would be leveraged with federal or state funds and would not be funded by contributions from the members to the JPA. But there is the question of the ongoing operational expenses, and that's a further discussion we need to have with the other potential partners.
Right, because all these fundings so far have been competitive pots, right?
Correct.
And so it's never guaranteed. You can put an application. It takes months to hear whether you get the funding, and then if you have staff, they got to get their paychecks every month and their healthcare and their retirement. So it makes it a more challenging discussion to have down the road.
Supervisor Lopez, what is your desire here?
So the motion is to authorize the proposed JPA and direct ITD and county council to provide suggested modifications to the agreement and bring it back to the board when appropriate.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And that is second by Supervisor Phillips. So if we could have a roll call vote, please. Take it out to the public. Is there anybody out there? I see no hands raised. And I'm looking to see if we have any hands raised from the public. I see no hands raised.
You have phone number 902 with their hand raised.
902, is that a legacy hand or is that a new comment, Nina?
Yes, this is Nina Beatty again. I urge you not to act in haste. Community broadband can be a positive access. Excuse me, can you hear me?
Madam Chair, she already made public comments on this item, I believe.
No, I believe it was the last item, Supervisor Alejo. This is a new comment, new item.
This is a new comment.
Yes,
May I
thank you
start
very
my
much.
comment over again?
Yes.
I ask you not to act in haste. Community broadband can be a positive asset, but open access business model doesn't work if it allows wireless antennas and nodes next to bedrooms and schools and nursing homes. This agreement must be restricted to wired-only internet. Amend this GPA open access agreement to exclude wireless connections. Without exercising your due diligence, by making these decisions without evaluation of the many costs, it could be argued that you're acting in arbitrary and capriciously. The FCC was sued over its failure to update its RF exposure standards, and it lost. The court declared its order arbitrary and capricious and remanded back its decision in terms of long-term exposure, exposure to children, environmental effects, and new technologies, all of which are in this rollout. The New Hampshire legislature created a report on 5G, and they expanded it to all wireless tech and warned of the health risks. This is some of the legal environment in which you make these decisions, in addition to ADA and for housing considerations. You've completely ignored health and environmental costs. You never respond to me on this, and you're acting in haste. This is reckless, and it's irresponsible given the established harms of wireless radiation. So please, amend this agreement, amend this JPA to focus on wired internet and specifically exclude all wireless connections from the system.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Beatty. And now we'll go to Cesar Lara.
Good afternoon, members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm actually calling in support of this formation of the JPA. I think that broadband and internet, I think what we saw during the pandemic, that this is an infrastructure need, just like electricity, just like phone lines, just like everything else. And so really supportive of it. And if there's any way that labor and community could support this, it's important. But we can't have, our children having to go to a Taco Bell to try and get internet access when we're going to face this in the future, and really applaud this direction and Supervisor Lopez. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm closing public comment, and we will bring it back for a roll call vote. We have a motion by Lopez and a second by Phillips. Yes, I'm sorry, did I miss you?
Amendment that when it comes back with the amendments, that we also get some budgetary sort of preliminary estimates of what the ongoing county costs could possibly be.
Yes, we can bring that.
Okay,
Thank you. That would be an
helpful.
important inclusion. Yeah, thank you. We need money attached to everything. Thank you to help us make good decisions. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so could we have a roll call vote, please?
Supervisor Alejo?
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips?
Aye.
Supervisor Lopez?
Aye.
Supervisor Root Askew?
Aye.
And Chair Supervisor Adams.
Aye. Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to close item number 20 and open item number 21, which is to get a preliminary analysis report in response to board item number 2022.8 regarding the expansion of commercial financing in Monterey County. And we have Richard Vaughn, the Director of Economic Opportunity / Development, who's here to make the report.
All right. Good evening, Chair Adams and Board of Supervisors. I'm here to provide a preliminary analysis report in response to board referral number 2022.08. So this referral seeks to provide an opportunity for expansion of commercial PACE financing to additional companies throughout the county, and provide a list of existing commercial PACE financing companies currently operating in the county. Doing further research, what I've come to find is we currently have in the county an existing agreement with the California Statewide Community Development Authority, or for short CSCDA, which partners with 14 commercial PACE financing companies to assist businesses throughout the county. For the essence of time, I'll keep it short and not list out all 14. But in doing this further research, what I've come to find is, should any potential commercial PACE financing companies be interested in providing their services to Monterey County, we currently do have a route for additional companies to access the Monterey County marketplace to provide these services. And by entering into this agreement that we have in place with the CSCDA, this helps to reduce the administrative requirements on the treasurer, tax collector, and auditor controller by leveraging CSCDA to manage and provide oversight of all 14 of these current financing companies here operating in the county. And furthermore, depending on the board's interest to establish an independent program separate from CSCDA agreement, staff will propose to do the following relative to the implementation. One, conduct an RFP for marketing services to assist with commercial PACE outreach to businesses across Monterey County. 2, work with Human Resources Department to add staff resources to begin recruitment for an additional management analyst for economic development. 3, conduct research and analysis to determine long-term costs and delayed response times associated with the Treasurer Tax Collector Department diverting staff to manage and oversee additional commercial PACE agreements and inquiries. And the board would direct staff to proceed with completion of the referral based on description in this report, or B, direct staff to proceed with the completion of the referral based on modification by Board of Supervisors, or return to the board with a more comprehensive analysis of referral and anticipated effort for completion, or receive referral response as complete.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. So Supervisor Lopez.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think there's some confusion here in terms of process. And I do believe that there's another entity like CSCDA under RCRC, Golden State Finance Authority, which handles those. And so that I sent that language to Charles and Nick. And so I believe we have those on hand. I'm not sure if you got a copy of those, but if you didn't, my request would be that we go ahead and defer action on this to a future meeting so that we can have a one-on-one meeting to look at those contracts that would not require that we hire additional folks.
Thank you for that. I think that's a very good suggestion because I nearly choked at $190,000 at this point. So thank you for that. So I think you would just bring it back probably later in April.
So happy to make that as a motion that we defer this to a future meeting, and I'll meet one-on-one with our new economic development director to handle the details for a future presentation.
See if it's even feasible for us before we bring it back. Okay, thank you. You have a motion.
Second.
Second from Phillips. Okay, is there anybody in the public who wishes to comment on this? I'm seeing none, and I'm seeing none of our hands raised, which is terrific. So could we please have a roll call vote?
Supervisor Lejo.
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips.
Aye.
Supervisor Lopez.
Aye.
Supervisor Askew.
Hi.
Chair Supervisor Adams.
Aye. Thank you very much. With that, I am closing item number 21 and moving forward to item 22. And I believe we have Lindsay Larrable to do a presentation here. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. And she is joined by Chief of Public Works, Parks and Facilities, Randy Ishii.
Thank you. Okay, do I have permission to share screen?
You may have permission. You have my permission, madam. We're all getting a little loopy here.
Sorry. I didn't have the login. I'm using a computer that's not mine. So is there a possibility from the Zoom sign in? Apologize. I did, yeah. Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay, and then green, share screen. Thank you for your patience, Lori. Oh, thank you.
Where's Eric now that we need him?
I apologize.
You're in there as a panelist. You should-
What's that?
You're in there as a panelist. Not sure why it wouldn't let you share the screen.
Oh, gosh. I'm so sorry.
Sorry. Let's try that share screen.
Okay, share screen.
Okay, let's try desktop one.
Desktop one. Okay.
I'm reading the font, the trailer. It said, okay, just scream.
Oh, it's probably blocking it. That was the issue.
Okay, so I'm gonna leave this show. Oh, no.
It's all right.
I can imagine.
And I can get it.
So how are we doing here?
It shows when
I need to
let's
calm
go.
down.
Okay. Turn the presentation. Go, sure.
We could go totally old school if you have.
Fun.
Should be just a couple more minutes.
I
We're
apologize.
almost there.
Let's see, what is the next one? Perhaps we can,
Charles, I just sent you a OneDrive link.
oh, there you go.
Oh, look at,
Oh, it's Wendy.
what? I know. Is this the one that was submitted?
Yeah, this is what we got.
It's also on the screen now. It's come up. Wendy, I think you get a gold star.
You're so great.
Thank you so much.
All right, that
All right,
broke
let's
the
go
ice.
ahead and please move forward.
That's right. Thank you
Item-
very much,
Thank you
Supervisor.
so
Good
much.
afternoon.
Is item number 22. So
Okay,
please move
great.
forward.
Thanks. I'll move forward, and I'm going to cut down the presentation slightly so we can move this along and because of time. So good afternoon or good evening. My name is Lindsay Larable. I am the Chief of Facilities, and I am presenting referral 2021.05. This is a presentation brought forth by Supervisor Leo in March 2021 to create a permanent memorial at the Government Center to honor those we have lost in our community. Next slide. For today's actions, I'm asking for the board report asked for 4 different items. One is to authorize the Department of Public Works, Facilities, and Parks to implement the county-wide COVID-19 memorial in response to the board referral. Number 2, item B, is to provide direction to staff for the location of the permanent memorial. Item C is to approve proposed design concepts to be further developed through a community engagement strategy. And lastly, item D is to direct that the COVID-19 memorial project be added to the proposed FY 21-22 capital funded project list. Total project estimated at $515,780. Just to note, a point of clarification, in the report, it was noted that staff has spent approximately 20% or 20,000 to date, but the actual numbers today as is $15,415, both consisting of consultant and staff time to develop this referral. Next slide. Okay, just a quick overview. This is from our Monterey County Health Department COVID-19 data dashboard. It reported as of yesterday, we have lost 729 souls in Monterey County. So this just shows some graphs that are from the website that show that all ethnic and racial groups have been affected, all ages, gender and regions within our community have been affected by COVID-19. Next slide. Okay, so per the referral, the memorial is proposed to be located at the Government Center here in Salinas, so right here at this facility. Staff has identified several locations that would be a suitable location for the installation as part of the main corridor that connects between Church Street or Capitol Street to Church Street. Next item. Oh, I guess I can control it. Okay, so the 3 potential items on here are, like I said, are part of the main corridor. We have location 1 identified in red, that's in front the walkway. We have a location number 2, that is the location behind the old jail facing the front of the facility. And location 3 is the area up there. It's currently occupied by boards, public notice boards, and that could be relocated and then that could be changed into an area for memorial. Next slide.
Lindsay, is there a way to go full screen? Because it's hard to see on
Oh,
Zoom.
yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Can we do that?
Julian, can you put it
Yeah,
in
it is a little
presentation
small. Were you
mode?
able to see the locations at the campus? Okay.
Julian, you need to put it in presentation mode.
Sorry, I'm trying to. Okay, great. Thank you. Hope that helps. Okay, so I'll quickly go through. There's three concepts that we're looking for direction to continue developing through a community outreach program. Concept A is an embedded sketched element. This would go on that pathway in location 1, and that would be either a metal inlay or it could be a series of etchings. Again, the idea is that through it creates a series, and together it creates a cohesive design. In that there will be milestones along the pathway that will allow visitors to experience the memorial while walking through the space. Again, we'll provide benches for areas of contemplation. Next slide. Concept B. This concept is a continuous undulating freestanding wall made of colored acrylic panels. It is to signify the diversity and connection of those of us in Monterey as Monterey County residents. This is an opportunity to engrave a poem, maybe names or images onto the panels. The design will be transparent to maintain visibility. So we have the light coming through, and then also for in the evenings with uplighting that we get the visual effect. Next slide. Concept C. This is the final option, and this is the option is an artistic interpretation of the National COVID-19 Memorial in Washington, D.C. These lighted steel columns with cutouts illustrate a pattern or a series of words or poems. The light columns will appear to have a random layout, but when viewed from a medallion on the concrete walkway at a vantage point, the design will come together to create a unified visual element. All concepts will utilize solar lighting, recycled materials, and native planning as appropriate. Next slide. One of the most critical parts of the project development is the community engagement. So this is where staff will develop a strategy that includes both online platforms and in-person meetings to seek feedback from the community to help develop the details of the memorial. Whether it is poetry, images, or other ideas, staff will take these ideas, develop a final design that is reflective of the community's vision, and then staff will come back to the Board of Supervisors for the final concept and approval. Okay, next slide, please. The budget. So at the beginning of the presentation, I identified $515,000. Now that is the high end. These are initial estimates. These do create a 35% contingency because of unknowns. So this would be an example of concept A, that was the etchings along the walkway. Now concept B, where we have the acrylic colored panels, would be closer to $420,000, knowing that there's about $103,000 of them there in contingency as of now. Option C, the final option, the interpretation of the Washington, D.C. Memorial, that would be closer to $308,000, with $74,000 of that being a contingency. Again, through the process of the community outreach, we will refine the project, and that will also mean we will refine the budget. So when we come back to the board, we will have a tighter number, I would say, a project number. Next slide. And just goes through a timeline. And in general, we think this project, given the funding authorization, that we would be done between 18 to 20 months from start to end. Okay, so next slide, please. So again, we go next slide. Thank you. And that's just reviewing the actions that I have provided at the beginning of the presentation. Again, once we get this approved as a project, staff will go back to the budget committee and work with the budget office to identify funding strategies to support this project. And that concludes staff's presentation, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. So let's see, which way will we start? We'll start at this end. Supervisor Phillips, questions and comments.
Well, yeah, I like the idea. I just was hoping we would come up with something more modest. You know, I was thinking 250,000, something more modest spending. I have difficulty spending $500,000, and I frankly, and I don't see that going down. And have we explored whether any companies, and there's interesting sign company that builds more than just signs and stuff out of metal and other items, whether they would donate some of their services on it. But the cost is my concern. And doing anything behind the old jail, we still don't know what we're going to do there. I would have reservations about that from a long range perspective.
Thank you, Supervisor Phillips. Supervisor Lopez.
I agree with concerns about cost. I would just wonder in terms of appropriate location. I think one of the places that I would like to see some investment is at Natividad, where we have a little extra funding as well currently in our budget. And I think that could be an appropriate location to create a meditation space. I know we recently received a large grant to create that space that we heard about here, and perhaps adding into that investment with leveraging the changes coming there to create a focus on this particular memorial within that could be a good way to leverage both, do a little more. We'll have some additional planning dollars already available. So that's just a quick off the cuff thought about an opportunity to leverage dollars.
Thank you. Go to Supervisor Wendy Rudascu. I'm so sorry, but yes, I'll be happy to go to Supervisor Alejo first. I will weigh in. Yes, Supervisor Alejo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first of all, I want to thank Lindsay for all her good work in getting some early concepts of. I think all three are great. I think and I think the locations are great, and certainly I'm more hoping that we would do it at the government center, because this is the place that we come to, and the public mostly comes to for public meetings, and it's a tribute to families, 729 families so far that have lost a loved one to this pandemic. And it's something that I think none of us have ever seen in our lifetimes, to lose this many residents because of a virus, a deadly virus. And I think the most appropriate place is for it to be on the 168 West Alisal campus, right between the county government center and our courthouse, and a place that's frequented by the public for our public decisions that get made. I'm sure that we could try to scale down some of the costs some way with working with staff and working with the budget committee. And as Lindsay pointed out, part of that cost is a 35% contingency because of the unknowns in this current environment. But out of all the areas, I think I agree with Supervisor Phillips that area behind the old jail, we got a proposal to try to get some state money to redo the old jail. So I agree there's some concern there. I think the area where the bulletin board's at, if any of our colleagues go out there, you'll see it's just it's a nice plot, an area that could give it its own respect, and the billboards could be moved to another area. But it's for me, it's a perfect location and a perfect spot to have such a tribute. But I think out of all the three concepts, the first one is good, but it's a walkway, and it's not the best place for someone who has lost their loved one to come and sit down and reflect, especially as we did in early March, having an annual Memorial Day for all the COVID victims and their families. And in the site 3, that would be a place kind of to the side where we could have something beautiful, and families could come on an annual basis, or when they come to give it the government center to remember their loved ones. So I really like, out of all the concepts, design 2 and 3 because it provides for that. But I kind of relooking at it, really like number 2, but I really like number 3 as well, because at the nighttime, that would really light up and would look really nice on our government center in that particular location. So I just wanted to I know we're going to go through a public process to get public input on this, but I do like concepts 2 and 3 the most, and area 3 as the most appropriate place. And I would encourage my colleagues to go and look at that site where the bulletin boards are now, and you'll see that there's not much there besides just an empty dirt and some bulletin boards that can be moved. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is it possible for you to show in bigger screen now the 3 locations? It was a little confusing and it kind of.
A little bit more. A little bit further. Think one more. There we go.
Right. Okay. So this is location number 1.
Location 1 is identified in red. So that's the walkway from Capitol Street to our main entry here.
Okay, got it.
Location 2 is right where we look at it behind the jail when we walk out of the government center.
Okay, and that's the one we're worried about because it's involving the
Yeah.
school jail. Okay.
And location 3 is the location that Supervisor Leo is referring to. That is where you see those bulletin boards in the trash can. So it would be a lovely space to improve. Again, that would require relocating the bulletin boards, but that shouldn't be a problem.
And is that the courthouse behind?
It is,
Okay,
correct.
got it. And so like the restaurant is kind of
It's literally at that corner right there.
right
like,
there.
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you so much for that. Okay. Supervisor Askew.
Yeah, thank you. So I feel a little awkward and sort of how we navigate forward with this one. I don't want to in any way suggest by my comments or my thoughts on this that I'm not deeply sorrowful for those who have lost their lives and the family members who've passed through COVID. However, I'm struggling with the cost on this. And I'm struggling with the fact that COVID is going to remain with us into the future, and that we have families who are still right now suffering, who are struggling, who are working really hard to recover. We didn't even have a unanimous vote to continue providing services to individuals this year. And yet, at a cost of upwards of $700 per person to invest in a memorial. I'm not sure how to reconcile those realities that exist. So I think that at the very least, I think we need to find something that's going to be a little more in alignment with the funds that we have available, recognizing the competing interests that are needed to serve the very real and pressing and urgent needs of our community. I think that a memorial is something I supported from the beginning. I do think that it's appropriate, absolutely. In terms of locations, I like the idea of thinking about Natividad as a property. It's across the street from a large, park where community members do come to. I think a park setting feels more appropriate to me. And there may be parks that we have that have, a need for some infrastructure to support the families and those who are utilizing them. And there may be a way to have this match up with some of those needs that exist. So in terms of direction, I'm trying to get clearer about the direction that we give to you all to go back and move forward. And doing so in a way that really does respect the families who've lost loved ones and the families who will continue to lose loved ones as a result of this pandemic. So I'm not sure that I have really clear direction. I'm struggling with what's in front of us today. And I don't know that this is what I'm able to support at this time, but I do think there's a way to, maybe back into something that's more feasible in line with the resources that we have available.
Thank you. And actually, I don't even know what resources we have available because there's nothing in the budget for this. Is that correct?
We haven't sought out funding sources, and that's what we were going to do is if this was voted to be a priority project that we'd work with the CO's office. And that could just be that, we have 200,000 or 100,000, and then we back into that. So we could work through that in the budget committee process if that feels comfortable for the board.
So I just a few thoughts of my own, and they closely parallel both Supervisor Phillips and Supervisor Askew's comments. We don't even have the money, $500,000 to complete the CIP projects that we have. And I just think, okay, it could take care of fixing everything over at the Department of Social Services, or could do a library in Gonzales. And it just seems like a lot of money. And that is, unfortunately, my heart is here, but my brain and is helping me look at this a little bit differently. And one of the things that I'm conscious of, I don't know if any of you ever go on the rec trail in Monterey, but the city of Monterey has done just a beautiful, very subtle and very elegant tribute to COVID victims. They planted I think it's about 6 cherry trees along the rec trail with a small plaque that just indicates this is in memory of the people who lost their lives through COVID. And when I think of that, and I'm looking at either location number 1 or even location number 3, or perhaps at Natividad, because it, the only reason why I don't like Natividad is that COVID is illness. And I kind of hate to have it at the hospital. I feel like if we had it in a more graceful place, it could be better. But just looking at the walkway that's going down, if we had a series of some tree, whatever it may well be, something that blooms in the spring perhaps, and just a small plaque, I can see where that would be a very fitting and like more appropriate tribute for what it is that we're thinking about, that we want to do. My expectation is that would be under $50,000. I mean, I can't imagine that it's going to cost, $10,000 a tree to put something in. So if that's where my mind would go. But I think even though this is very grand and very beautiful, I just do not feel that our community can afford this. I feel like I would certainly support something subtle and that would be just far more affordable. And I think when you think about what the people in our community, all of the people in our community would want, I don't think they would want to see us spending this much money on this beautiful piece of art. I feel like we can find another way to do it, especially if it's trees that would bloom in the spring. So that's just my take on this. So,
Madam Chair.
Yes, Supervisor.
I would just add, I know that if the 725 families would be hearing these comments, I think we would all be responding differently to tell the families that a memorial to their loved ones, their mothers and their fathers, their grandparents, their brothers and sisters, their cousins, their coworkers or their neighbors, that we would be having a whole different conversation on this. And so it troubles me that our board would think that this is too much money to pay a proper, beautiful tribute that will be here for beyond our lifetimes, and always reminded the community about the hundreds that we lost to this pandemic. But I also understand the cost concerns, and I think that we can move forward, hopefully, on doing a memorial at the government center, because as some have pointed out, we only go to Natividad when we have somebody there visiting, or somebody, we go to the hospital, we have somebody visiting, and usually we're in the waiting room. We're not outside contemplating. And I would encourage people to go visit Natividad during the day, and you will see where most visitors are hanging out at the hospital. And this is the proper place, because this is our government center. This is a center of decision making for the county. And so I think that's the most appropriate place. But considering the comments of concerns, I think we could scale it down and give a proper budget of $250,000 or $300,000, $300,000, just to allow that contingency to take place, but scale it down so that it doesn't go so high, and to address some of the concerns of my colleagues. I think we can move forward with the scaled down project with the budget so that it can remain at the government center. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Who wants to speak?
I would feel comfortable at 300 with the acknowledgement that we want to open this up. I was approached today actually in the parking lot by somebody who said they wanted to pitch in, representing a very large nonprofit. And so that meeting just got booked for me for this Friday. So if we could come in and open it up and say, we're going to look for partners on this, I think that would be a great way to approach it.
What's your thoughts about, because I think we could get more for our money out at Natividad, but I tend to agree with Supervisor Leo a little bit that this may be a more appropriate place. So, but
I'm the one that said that. But just don't forget, I said, don't do it at Natividad. That's where you go when you're sick. Do it someplace else.
But and then people come here when they're got a court case too,
Exactly,
but I tend to agree that this may be a more appropriate location.
I concur.
I'm still choking at 300. I'm so sorry. If we wanted to, perhaps it should be this way. I don't know who's going to pay for this part, but if you can get it covered by outside contributions, then, count me in. But I think to take taxpayers' money and to spend it in this way, and I think people would be troubled by it. And I agree. My heart goes to the people who have lost loved ones. I mean, I can't even imagine how horrible it is. It's horrible to lose somebody to cancer, quite frankly. And, sorry. Would you like to?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that I'd feel more comfortable with a figure not to exceed $100,000. And if there's opportunities for match or partner participation, or as you mentioned, Supervisor Lopez, nonprofit, building that up beyond, or if, Natividad feels strongly and wants to participate as the board, that's a board recommendation. But I think that we have to, I'm a steward of all resources for the county. And I do think that it's appropriate that we take note and make it, and make something that is significant. But I'm not comfortable going above $100,000 of county dollars.
I would, if that's a motion, I would second it.
Well, I don't know whether I can. I do think that there's a real possibility of leveraging our investment.
If we put in 100 and, you can come up with the matches, great. But I mean, who's going to do the work? Is that going to be Lindsay going out and trying to raise money for this? That doesn't seem like
we got our fundraiser here, and I would think maybe community foundation and one of the donor advised funds might be feasible.
So perhaps what we should do is go out and try to raise funding for it. Let's put it on pause until we go out and test the waters, to see if we can get community funding, community foundation, perhaps some of the private larger foundations over here, to be able to use our 100,000 to leverage additional funding up to 300 and see where it goes. But, as I mentioned, I think having something living like a grove of trees would be a beautiful tribute. But evidently, we want something different.
What about moving forward with authorizing us to spend 100,000 towards it in seeking other ones and subject to coming back?
I'd be willing to do that.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we could do 150 with match, right? Say 150, but we're going to go seek the match.
Well, I think we're doing 100, but go seek the match. It's what Wendy had said, and that's certainly what I believe.
But that's really low. We had a proposal of $500,000, and we're not even giving a third of that. So I would hope that we could do 250 and then do an F, because that's realistic, and then to get the project off the ground, and then pursue some private dollars to match the 250. That would get us within range to do something nice on that parcel.
The other option would be to put this off for today, go have those conversations before we come back and see realistically what's available out there. Hearing where we're at, I think that gives us the time to see what kind of interest is there from some of those nonprofits realistically.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look at what the DA's office has just done. They're putting in a very lovely memorial to victims, people who in Monterey County. It's something small and subtle and lovely. So at any rate, I think we've come to concurrence that we will fly this by the community to see if there's an appetite for people contributing to this. And perhaps people will have heard us having this discussion and will come forward without our even having to ask.
Yeah, I would think that we might talk offline about which nonprofits and which foundations we ought to chat with. We can pick them off a little bit. So.
That sounds like a good idea. Yes, I think Supervisor Root asked you.
So I withdraw my motion and I'll put in a motion to defer this conversation to table this item to a future meeting. Do we need to be specific about a time certain?
I would ask that we say a month.
Within the next 45 days. I know we have
That
a
works
break
for me.
coming up. So within the next 45 days to have this return after we've had some conversations, we'll get some more information and be able to continue the conversation. And I would just like, I'll make that motion that we table. If there's a second.
And I'll hold the second.
Okay. And then my second comment is, I think what we're talking about is really something that is quite lovely and quite appropriate. It makes me sad that it's not something that we're able to move forward with in a sort of coordinated way. I think that my ask of everyone would just be that we try to find the right way to have this particular issue not be something that's divisive, but is something that really truly does honor and respect the realities that so many of our residents have faced and so many will continue to face moving forward. But thank you. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you. I do as well. So this has been very difficult, I'm sure, for you, because you've done a lot of work on it. It's so beautiful. I can hardly stand it. But I just, I feel like we'll see what the community says, right? And we'll try the funders and see what they have to say. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. Could we take a roll call vote, please? Is there anybody in the public that wishes to talk to this item? I'm seeing no hands raised. No. All right. Thank you very much for reminding me. Supervisor Lejo?
I'll support today to have this conversation another day, but it's disappointing that we couldn't take action.
Supervisor Phillips?
Aye.
Supervisor Lopez?
Aye.
Supervisor Root Askew?
Aye.
Chair Supervisor Adams?
Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you. And with that, we will close item 22 and move to item 23, which is to receive a preliminary analysis report in response to Board Referral 2022.02, requesting the formation of a Sheriff Oversight Board.
Chair, if I
Oh, yes, sorry, Ms. Blitch.
in a nutshell, because it's late, staff is seeking further direction if the board wishes to proceed as to the type of model they would like for oversight, whether it be an independent auditor or an inspector general model, or more the community advisory committee. And we are also seeking direction as to the scope of review of either the independent auditor or community advisory committee. And Nick Chulis is here to speak to the potential costs of both models.
Yeah, thank you. Very briefly, Madam Chair, I can't really tell you what the costs might be at this point. That's part of the dilemma we're faced with, because we don't know which way the board wants to go, if the board wants to pursue an independent auditor or a more of a committee structure. We believe the committee structure would have could be a significant staffing and resource cost, depending on what the scope of their authority is and how busy they would be. But we doubt that it could be absorbed with existing staff. It would probably require some additional staffing. And we propose that if we get direction from the board today on which model you're interested in, we could come back within 60 days with a better analysis of the cost potential. So.
Any comments, Supervisor?
I do, because I think we have to get to the bottom line first, and I don't support this, and I don't support moving forward on it, at least at this time. And I have a lot of reasons I feel it would be ill-advised to move forward on that. My suggestion is we put this over until we have a new sheriff and maybe things calm down a little bit and there isn't such an anti-law enforcement thing going on here. So, but I think if you're moving forward on something like this, we ought to have a lot of public input into it, where they stand on it. And frankly, I think it's ill-advised, especially at this time. So before we expend a lot more resources on this, I would like to have more reflection. Thank you.
Supervisor
Madam Chair, I too would prefer to wait till next year when a new sheriff is elected. I know we're in the middle of a campaign season now, and it is one of the topics I've heard multiple sheriffs speak about, sheriff's candidates. And so I think for me, I prefer to hear them out, have that conversation and see where we end up in January and have a conversation with the newly elected sheriff about what they think would work best, since that will be at minimum a 4-year relationship.
Thank you. Supervisor Rudescu?
Yeah, thank you. As a maker of the referral, and thank you, team, for bringing back some decision points for us to consider. And I want to be really clear. I hear your concerns, Supervisor Phillips, about this being an anti-law enforcement or anti-sheriff type of action, and that's really not where I'm coming from with this. So if I can explain maybe a little bit more. This past year, my first year on this board, it was a difficult, challenging relationship that we had with the sheriff, as noted by a number of public actions as well as private discussions. And I think that as I take my responsibility as a supervisor seriously, trying to understand where those opportunities and where the appropriate places are for the board to engage with the sheriff's office. In fulfilling our obligation as stewards of county dollars, as the fiduciary responsible party here, that it would have been, there are points where it would have been helpful to have someone representing the Board of Supervisors who was authorized and had the authority to ask certain questions or ask for certain information of the sheriff's office. And AB 1185 allows for that authority. It's one more tool that we would have to be able to utilize our authority to conduct our jobs as supervisors. So I think that the range of what this could be used for could be very wide, and could be what you're describing as something that is punitive or an aggressive and an offensive supporting an offensive relationship. But what I'm envisioning, or what I would propose, is that we think about something that if we were to pursue 1185 authority, that we would at the very least assign that authority to our CAO, or assign that authority to our county council, that we would have that individual report to the board, that it would be authority that we would have available to us if and when needed to engage in the type of responsible activities that we have as supervisors. The scopes of review, I think, would be on an as needed basis as issues arise. We've had issues arise in recent years that we didn't have the authority or tools we needed to be able to appropriately represent our duty to the people of this county. So just to reframe the conversation, I would like to see us move forward. I think at the very least, assigning the authority to one of our existing staff, giving them the scope only of the sheriff, having scope of review be on an as needed basis as issues arise, specific to policies, procedures, or programs, implementation of policies, procedures, or programs, budget, staffing. And I believe that this jurisdiction would be concurrent with the existing jurisdictions, only because those other jurisdictions of the civil grand jury, CRO, the DA, and some of the DOG activities, they're not there to represent the county board of supervisors. They have their own sort of things that they would be looking at. So I think that we have a responsibility to take our job seriously, and to take advantage of this opportunity that is available to us. So that's sort of, I think, some context about why I submitted the referral and what I would hope that we could use it for.
So one of the things that I had thought about, I have looked at this both ways. In fact, I talked to 2 candidates for the position to get what their take was on having an oversight committee. One thought no, the other thought you can never have too much public input. So that's why I am feeling more comfortable waiting until after we have a new sheriff. But one of the benefits that I see from this is that it could end up being like an ombudsman that could serve as a liaison between the sheriff and we. And I'm thinking we probably should have something like that with most of the other elected officials, but it's just the sheriff's office where we've had difficulty. But a benefit that we could have from this is that this person, if it were a neutral person that we had, like an ombudsman, could bring to light some of the issues that the sheriff has that we may not see when we're only getting the input from the sheriff or the sheriff's department itself. I mean, if somebody, I go back to the term ombudsman, came forward and started talking about the issues that exist within the jail that really need to be addressed. And I think that could be a very positive thing for the sheriff. Not that it would be like a hammer over the sheriff's head, but I do feel that is a more prudent approach to not to distract everyone at this point with pulling this together, because it will be a distraction. I'm sure of that. Let's just get the election out of the way, and then let's bring it up then. And I will promise to be supportive of you once the election is behind us to bring it forward again, because I think that I think there's merit to that from both sides. So at this point, it's your referral, but it sounds as if you are, do you want to make a motion to?
Madam Chair, I got my hand raised, please.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Luis. Yes, forgive me. Yes, please.
I had two questions. One was for Les Gerardo County Council to explain what is the difference between the Inspector General position versus what the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors did, which was to have an outside auditor be empowered to do some of the things that were provided in the new legislation. So if you could explain that. And then secondly was just asking Under Sheriff Minot to get his thoughts on the referral as well. I think it's more to hear the department's perspective in brief as well.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, members of the board. The difference has to do with the breadth of what the Inspector General is authorized to do under the statute versus what I understand the Board of Supervisors in Santa Cruz was willing to do with the support of the new sheriff up there. Again, I've talked to the county council up in Santa Cruz a little bit about this, and apparently their sheriff was open to the idea of having an independent auditor to review the activities of the sheriff's office, but it wouldn't have all of the powers and authority of the Inspector General. For example, the ability to issue subpoenas that the new legislation provides. So there's a difference, at least my understanding, in what the breadth of the authority of the Inspector General is and what the independent auditor up in Santa Cruz would do. And again, I would emphasize that apparently the sheriff up there supported the idea of the independent auditor with some review functions. I hope that was responsive, Supervisor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Under Sheriff?
I am.
Sheriff,
there we go. Thank you, Supervisor Alejo. Just a couple things. It's really difficult to describe the amount of audits, inspections, oversight, and things that we undergo just as a normal course of doing business. And between when Department of Justice is here auditing, and I appreciate the supervisors' discussions about they're doing an audit not really on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, but really to fulfill their roles of office. But when Department of Justice is here to audit our law enforcement teletype system, when the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training comes down, they audit not only the training files, but every hiring file to make sure that all that is being done properly. When the health department comes in, I mean, our food service operation in the jail, it gets audited to the exact same standard as the sardine factory, or pick your favorite restaurant in the county. But that's anything but a rubber stamp, the amount of the degree of scrutiny that goes into putting out health and sanitary meal service. When the Board of State and Community Corrections comes, they show up, they do a big pre-inspection, they do a big document request for all the various policies, and then they come back, and it's literally days of time and energy that goes in working with BSCC. That's historically been in every other year audit, but with the changes in Sacramento, that's going to be in every year. So we're going to see a doubling of the inspections by BSCC. The civil grand jury, as the board knows, after we experienced the escape from custody last year, the civil grand jury came and did, I mean, really an incredibly thorough investigation and multiple document requests, multiple visits here to our shop with, you know, to include, you know, going and touring the site, looking at where it happened, looking for any critiques and after action things that we learned. And it was a really thorough look at the whole event and the mistakes that happened that led to it. So there is a good deal of oversight. I know Susan Blitch is there. She could speak far greater than I as to the oversight that comes with the Hernandez litigation, the plaintiffs' counsels that are in the building, the experts for medical, dental, ADA, security that are all there, and just the massive document productions that we do for those folks. So there is a good deal of oversight. And then the only other thing I would want to offer, Supervisor Root asked you, I appreciate your comment. I will say this, I can't think of a time, the sheriff's made it very clear to me and to the chiefs that if a supervisor or a supervisor's office calls and they need something, or there's questions, or there's concerns, or there's comments, basically it's all, you know, drop what you're doing and get it done, because they're answering a lot of times to a constituent concern. And I know we talked recently about having you come over for a full-blown, you know, come see as much as you'd like to see in the jail. I know we've done that. Supervisor Alejo's been here. Supervisor Alejo recently came out for a ride-along, which we were really happy to host, just to give that kind of perspective on that line level, you know, boots on the ground deputy sheriff perspective. I know Supervisor Root Askew is getting ready to come, I think tomorrow, Thursday, for a ride along, which will be great. And Chair Supervisor Adams, I know that Chief Thornburg extended an invitation to your office today. So although there may not be somebody working on behalf of the board, I can't think of a time that whether it be Charles or Les or Susan or any one of your staff members has called and said, hey, we got a question or a concern, that we haven't tried to be as responsive as we can be. And you know what, there may be ways that we can improve that. You may be able to find a way to make that work better when there's a new sheriff here next year. But ultimately, if the board doesn't, we're gonna you know, try our best to work within. But I really like the idea of see how things go, establish a relationship with the new sheriff, and see how that works. See if you've got that same direct access to the whole command team and can get things that you need when anytime you need them. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Sheriff Minot. I appreciate your comments. And now I'd like to go back to
Madam Chair, I wasn't done with my comments. I asked 2 questions, but now just on the issue on the table, I did want to just say that to the undersheriff in response to answering my question, that there has been examples where the communication hasn't been as good, and I have raised it. Certainly when the jail broke, I asked for a report because we got the information in the news, and that should have been something that the board should have got notice of when things like that happen. That was just one example, but I don't want to go into all the details. So I think communication can be improved, but I agree, you and Chief Bass and others have been responsive, and I appreciate your professionalism. And I just wanted to kind of ask the question about the auditor versus the independent, the inspector general, because that's where I think when it's needed by the board, I think there needs to be a professional kind of really doing that work that has the skills, that it's less political, but it's more somebody who has the skills to look into and answer the right questions, get the right documents, and be able to provide the information the board is asking for. I think there's a place for that. But I think that's the conversation for the future of this board to really consider if it wants to move in that direction. So I just want to kind of indicate where my thinking is at. But I also hear the comments from my colleagues about there's an election and giving an opportunity to see who the new sheriff comes in, and to whether this should be brought up after that election is completed. And I think I could go with that and bring this up after the November election. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Alejo. Are there any final comments from the board before I take it out to the public? I have a Cesar Lara. Your hand is up if you'd like to speak. Cesar Lara?
Yes, sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. Cesar Lara with Milpa. And on this issue, I think a number of departments have boards. You know, probation departments has the JJC and the JJCC. You know, the health department has a number of commissions that help guide them as well, along with Natividad, along with the Department of Social Services. And it's a bigger question around the role, the Board of Supervisors, because you guys have the fiduciary responsibility for the money that is given to all your departments, including the Sheriff's Department, and having some oversight and some way of having some transparency, because like Supervisor Alejo said, there's a number of examples that show that the department has not been transparent, has not given the information to the community or to the Board of Supervisors when requested. Other counties across California are doing this. And, you know, I understand what staff is doing, but it's clear that you're trying to make it more complex than it needs to be. And that it's not about who gets elected as sheriff or who is the current sheriff, but it's about the fiduciary responsibility that the Board of Supervisors has. It's a significant department with significant staff that could be more open and transparent to the community. And we have examples across the county system where you have oversight or community boards with staff support to do some of this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Cesar Lara. And I see no other hands raised, and I will bring it back to our board. And I think what I would like to suggest is that we defer this item until after the election, when we will bring it back, bring it back up and give it the due diligence and the consideration that it needs once we have a new sheriff and we're able to establish a relationship with that person. And I don't know if there will be a second to that motion or not.
Second.
Thank you very much. So with that, we have a motion and a second, and I'd like to take a roll call vote.
Supervisor Leo?
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips?
Aye.
Supervisor Lopez?
Aye.
Supervisor Askew?
No.
And Chair Supervisor Adams?
Aye. Thank you. With that, we will close item number 23 and go to item 24, which is board comments. Is there any member of the board that wishes to make comment at this time? Yes, Supervisor Lopez.
Sorry, very quickly, want to congratulate Joyce Vineyards on opening their new winery and experience in the Arroyo Seco. So proud to have them in South County. The Filipino women, we passed a resolution last week. My staff was able to attend the event this weekend and it went extremely well. Want to congratulate them as well on their beautiful event, 73rd anniversary. And lastly, last night I had the opportunity to attend the City of Gonzalez's meeting where they recognized, well, they had their 75th anniversary. I didn't realize they were that young, but the founder's name was actually Teodoro. They spelled exactly as my son. So I told them from a different Teo, congratulations, but very exciting. And congratulations to the City of Gonzalez on their leadership in their young 75 years. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Rude Askew.
Thank you. I just want to announce that I will be hosting my first in-person town hall meeting on Wednesday, April 6th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at Digital Nest in downtown Salinas. And at our town hall, we will be providing just sort of an overview of the work that I've been up to this past year. But more importantly, I'm really interested in hearing from local residents about the issues that you want to hear about, or you want to see me prioritizing, the concerns, priorities, goals. So everyone is welcome. That's on April 6th, Wednesday, April 6th, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at Digital Nest. It'll be our first in-person event. So
Congratulations and thank you. We will go to Supervisor Phillips.
Just real quick, since we're not having a meeting next week, next week from Thursday, the 31st, we're having our meeting out in Bronda about the change in more traffic coming there to the landfill. It's 6 o'clock, but we've been working with a number of agencies to get the word out and have pretty robust discussion with the community. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Supervisor Alejo.
Yeah, I wanted to first of all mention a couple good events that happened in my district in East Salinas. First of all, Cobia Salinas took place last Sunday. One of the biggest events organized all by youth of Salinas. So I want to commend them for their great work. And then this morning at 10 o'clock, the city of Salinas had a kind of a groundbreaking or ribbon cutting to kind of launch their efforts to beautify the Alisal with the $2 million+ grant they got from the state. So I really want to thank the city for another example of investing in the hardworking communities of East Salinas. Earlier today, too, I want to thank our colleagues at the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors and the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors for also joining us in unanimously supporting our effort to bring a veterans home to Monterey County. I want to thank specifically Supervisors Greg Caput and Supervisor Mark Slocum of San Mateo County for joining and supporting these efforts. I know Jason Cameron spoke before the San Mateo Board of Supervisors, and it just shows the growing momentum we have for our effort that I hope will make this a reality at some point. And lastly, this Friday at 10 o'clock at the Share Center, I want to invite our colleagues and the Salinas City Council. We are doing our groundbreaking of the community garden at the Share Center. They have 14 bins that were envisioned that are already there. So Supervisor Lopez and I raised some funding to get compost to fill all the bins. We got some topsoil and some plants donated by Salinas Home Depot. So we will be out there doing that work with some of the Share Center residents and the staff, and just wanted to invite the public or our board to join us at 10 o'clock. Should only take us about an hour or two to do the work, but it will be something really nice to add to our new Share Center for our homeless residents to grow their own food there at the site. Thank you very much.
It's very exciting. Thank you. And I have three quick things. Last week, I was delighted to honor the Carmel Valley Historical Society by providing a marker and organizing a dedication recognizing the Carmel Valley Airfield as an historic resource that has enriched the lives of many people out in the Carmel Valley, from the Santa fly-in to really enjoying the airport as it was once back in the day. And then on March 31st at 5 o'clock, the Monterey County Office of Emergency Services is going to be holding a meeting for those who were impacted by the Colorado fire that happened this January. The focus of the meeting will be on the post-fire risks of flash flooding and debris flows and what residents can do to be prepared. So please contact my office or the Office of Emergency Services for more information. And as we move to adjournment, I am asking you to allow me to adjourn in honor of a wonderful person who passed away 10 years ago today from cancer, who was my beloved husband, my own John N. Bailey. So the meeting is adjourned. Could we please have a read up from closed session?
Yes, Chair, there's one item to read out, and that's the board unanimously approved a tentative agreement with the County of Monterey Patrol Association. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.